Good afternoon, folks. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Takinia, the Senior Grants Program Manager for the Arts and Humanities Council in Montgomery County. I'm here with my colleague, Karen, who's another manager, and you have joined us for the General Operating Support 2 grant, formerly known as General Operating Support for Large Organizations. Thank you for joining us today. All right, folks. So here is our agenda for the day. We will provide a brief overview of the Arts and Humanities Council. We will go over the grants process. We'll also go over the FY21 grant guidelines. We will cover the Fluid Review online portal, the technical aspects of the portal in terms of submitting your letter of intent, your application, and your supplement materials, as well as your work samples. We'll give you some helpful grant writing tips, and we will also answer your questions. Please note that we will go through the full presentation before answering all of your questions, and you all are muted. So if you have a question, please type your question into the chat box. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat box where you can type in your question. You can type in your question at any point during the presentation. Just know that I will not be able to answer questions until the end of the presentation. And because general operating support grants are a bit more complicated than project support grants, this presentation is a little longer than some of our webinars. So if we run out of time and I am not able to answer your question by the end of the presentation, please know that staff is available and you can always contact myself or Karen or Anna Alicia to help you out if for some reason your question is not answered during this presentation, or obviously if you come up with questions later as you are working on your letter of intent or your application. Okay, so I'm not going to read this verbatim because you can find the Council's mission and vision in our guidelines, and you can also find these statements on our website. We are an entity that is here to support the vast diversity of cultural offerings that are available in Montgomery County. We are proud to be able to support such a diverse, large county. Montgomery County is the size of a small state, and we fund organizations, a variety of different sizes, and we also provide grants to individual artists and scholars. At the Arts and Humanities Council, equity and inclusion is of prime importance. All of our funding opportunities are centered on DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. You'll hear me use that acronym throughout the presentation, and you'll also see it referred to in our guidelines. This equity and inclusion statement is available in our guidelines. It's embedded in every set of guidelines for every funding opportunity. We do want our applicants to consider groups of people that are historically underinvested, underserved. That includes, but is not limited to, Alana communities, African American, Latinx, Asian, Arab, and Native American constituents, groups that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, as in low income, differently abled individuals, and also the LGBTQ+ communities. And also keep in mind that we want to make sure all of our funding is provided to programming that is ADA compliant. So that means that your public programming, as well as the institutions where your staff work, should be accessible to individuals with disabilities. This is an allowable cost to include in your budget, so know that if you are to receive a grant from the council, we encourage you to use some of our funding to make any of your programmatic offerings more ADA compliant. So for example, if you are doing a lecture for the community and you would like to have a sign interpreter there while you are doing a lecture, please know that we are happy to pay for the cost of that sign interpreter. And also, when you go to our guidelines, you'll see this ADA compliance statement. At the end of this statement, you'll see a hyperlink that says here. When you click on here, you will be brought to a rather thick document that provides a variety of tips on how to make your programmatic offerings more accessible to the community. So here's the grants timeline, or process rather. Right now, you all should be working on your letter of intent. The letter of intent deadline is right around the corner. It's this Friday. Once you have completed the letter of intent, you will hear back from staff either way as to whether your letter of intent has been approved or if we have any questions about the content of your letter of intent. If your letter of intent is approved, you will be invited to submit a full application. After the application deadline has passed, staff do a quick eligibility check again, and then all of the eligible applications are forwarded to the panel. The panel is always comprised of a diverse collective of very knowledgeable individuals who have been working in the arts and humanities field. We always make sure that we have diverse composure in every sense of the word in terms of race and ethnicity, age. We try our best to have gender balance, though this can be tricky considering that the arts and humanities sector is overwhelmingly female, but we try our best to still aim for gender balance. We also make sure that the group has expertise in every facet that's needed to make an organization operate in a healthy manner. So that means that the panelists will have knowledge of fundraising, financial management, marketing and communications, programming, as well as communal outreach and service to the community, as well as understanding how to reach underinvested communities. Our public meetings, our panel meetings are public, and we encourage all applicants to attend our panel reviews. It's a wonderful learning opportunity for applicants. If you have the time, it's worth your while to stick around, not only to hear the assessment of your own proposal, but also to hear the assessment of other proposals so that you can learn various different ways that you can strengthen your proposals for future deadlines. After the panel meeting, we will collect all of the panel's feedback. We will pass that feedback to the grants committee for their review. The grants committee will review the panel's commentary and ratings and scores, do their own check, and then the grants committee will report their assessment to the board of directors. The board has the final say on who can actually receive a grant. Please know that we do have a lot of cooks in the kitchen to make sure that this is a fair review panel, a fair review rather of all of the applications that are submitted. So, sometimes I hear misguided statements from the field. People think that staff make all the final decisions, or they assume that only the panel makes the final decision. Know that there are a lot of eyes on your proposal, and while the panel's commentary is held in very high regard, the panel, all of their recommendations are checked by a number of people, and that includes the grants committee and the board of directors. So after the board makes their final assessment, grant award notifications are announced to the public, and we then require all grantees to meet with us one-on-one to go over the panel's assessment of their proposals. Normally, these meetings start in August and continue through early September. Staff will contact you, in the summer to schedule your one-on-one meetings. These are important meetings, and, this is a 2-year funding opportunity, so know that you'll have a meeting that will cover FY21, and also we'll meet with you to go over your reporting for the second year. Okay, so in terms of the grant guidelines, before I discuss all of the details that are embedded in our guidelines, we want to provide a overview of the revamp process that we went through. I know a lot of you have heard about this already, but I do want to refresh your memory that the Arts and Humanities Council went through an extensive overview and revamp for all of our funding opportunities to make sure that moving forward, our funding is centered on DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. This included 8 listening sessions. These were public forums held with the community. We spaced these out over 2 years, so I know a number of you attended these sessions and offered your feedback, and we thank you for your attendance and the feedback that you offered. We also submitted a couple of surveys, including an equity survey, and received responses to the field, gauging their understanding and interpretation of equity and inclusion. We researched over 42 different grant makers all over the country. This includes public grant makers that are very similar to us, that use taxpayer funds to re-grant to cultural organizations and to artists and scholars within their communities. So know that the changes that are embedded in our funding opportunities were not done in a vacuum. They were done with careful consideration of the community's needs, of what other grant makers are doing in the field, and also we took into account the consideration of our grants committee and our board. We had 2 meaty grants committee retreats where we discussed all of our funding opportunities as well. So I'm not going to read this slide verbatim, but know that this is general operating support, not project support. General operating support covers day-to-day operating costs to further the general mission and work of an organization. Grant award support organizations that work in a wide array of arts and humanities disciplines, including the performing arts, folk and traditional arts, media arts, visual arts, literary arts, and a variety of humanities disciplines, including history and philosophy. In terms of the pertinent changes that occurred for this funding opportunity, which again was previously known as general operating support for large organizations, we decided to change the name of this funding opportunity. We believe that large is not an appropriate label per se. It's not an objective label. It doesn't really make sense for this funding category, and that there is a lot of budget diversity within this funding category. So we figured GOS II was a more open-ended label that made more sense. This opportunity is now a 2-year funding opportunity instead of a 1-year funding opportunity. And, during the listening sessions, we heard a lot of feedback from constituents who would prefer a 2-year funding opportunity to allow constituents to have more control over their financial planning process. We also hope that the 2-year funding opportunity will lessen your admin burden, since we know the full application does require time to fill out. We also have altered the evaluative criteria in terms of scoring. I will discuss that in more detail later on in the presentation. We have a minimum score now that's been implemented. You have to score at least 60 points in order to receive a grant. This is common practice among grant makers. In fact, 60 points is a bit low compared to other grant makers, but we figure since it's the first time that we're implementing a minimum score, it makes sense to start the score low to give the field time to adjust to a minimum score. And we also have a maximum award cutoff now, and this is because we want to make sure that our funding is dispersed in an equitable manner. So that means that organizations cannot receive a grant that's over $600,000. The letter of intent, as I mentioned earlier, is due soon. It's due on Friday. Please make sure that you submit this as soon as possible. It's not a long form. You should not be overwhelmed by it at all. Please do not fear the submit button in Fluid Review. I'll discuss that in more detail later on in the presentation, but know that if you hit the submit button and then you realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to include, mention a particular program in my letter of intent, you can go back and still edit your letter of intent as long as it's before the deadline, as long as it's before February 14th at 11:59 p.m. Even if you've hit submit, you can go back in there. But, please submit your letter of intent as soon as possible. We have received some already, and we thank you for your submittal. So the letter of intent is an eligibility tool. We use it to screen applicants to make sure that they are actually eligible for funding. The eligibility requirements are explained in detail in the guidelines. We can only fund organizations that have arts and or humanities focused missions. Organizations must have annual cash operating expenses and income of at least $150,000. Organizations must demonstrate 501c3 status, be governed by an independently legally liable board of directors, and all organizations must have a full-time paid executive director. That's an individual who works at least 35 hours, and this person should report directly to the board. These eligibility requirements have not changed compared to previous years. Another element that has not changed is that we have 3 different eligibility categories. We have the core group of applicants. Core applicants must have their primary office be in Montgomery County. If you are a core organization, you must have a minimum of 40% of your board residing or working in Montgomery County, and at minimum, 51% of your programs must be offered directly in Montgomery County. And please note that for all of the eligibility requirements that I'm describing, including the previous slide, organizations must meet all of these requirements for the previous 3 consecutive fiscal years immediately prior to the application deadline. So that means that, for example, if you're an organization and you just changed your mission to be focused on arts and humanities and you just did it this year, then you're technically not eligible. You must have a mission that's focused on the arts and humanities, and that must be the case of your mission for the previous 3 consecutive fiscal years. In order to be eligible as an associate organization, you must have a primary office in Montgomery County. You must have a minimum of 40% of your board members residing or working in Montgomery County, and 25 to 51% of your programs and services must take place in Montgomery County. And in order to be an affiliate organization, you must have a Montgomery County local phone number. A minimum of 15% of your board members must reside or work in Montgomery County. You have to have a regular season of programming in Montgomery County, and you must have staff present on the premises of a core arts or humanities organization, at least 1,000 hours a year distributed over no fewer than 40 weeks during the year. Give me 1 second, folks. I need to take a sip of water. Okay. So the allowable operating income and expenses for this category also has not changed, and it's also broken down in detail in your guidelines. I don't think I'm going to read over this full list, but know that we can't fund regranting, we can't fund capital improvement costs. Capital improvement costs are covered by the capital grant opportunity, which is now managed by the county. It is no longer managed by the Arts and Humanities Council. So if you have capital costs, it should be covered by the capital grant program. We cannot pay for bad debt or in kind as well. Here's another list for income that's not allowable. Um, this includes investment revenues, in-kind donations, revenue raised for capital, funds intended for regranting, and again, you can find this list within the guidelines. In terms of grant limitations, if you receive a grant, again, we can't cover capital improvement costs, construction or renovation projects. We can't cover the cost of receptions, refreshments, or food. So let's say you're having a snazzy wine and cheese gallery reception after you've presented a gorgeous art exhibition. We can't pay for that reception. We can't pay for the wine and cheese. And we cannot pay for activities for the exclusive benefit of an organization's members. We also cannot pay for the cost of merchandise. So let's say you're a theater company and you have cute little mugs with the name of your theater on there. We can't pay for that. We can't pay for scholarships, awards, or tuition assistance awarded by the organization because this is considered to be regranting, and this funding opportunity does not support regranting. And importantly, since we are in the midst of a political season, we cannot support any political advocacy or any activities that support or promote the interests of any one political party or candidate. And do remember that our funding needs to stay in the county. So that means that we cannot pay for any travel outside of the United States. Let's say you found a phenomenal artist from Brazil and you want to present this Brazilian artist, please note that we cannot pay for this person's flight. We cannot pay for this person's visa costs. Costs must stay in the United States. So a couple of things to keep in mind that are important. If you apply for GOS II, you cannot apply for any other grants with the exception of Wheaton Cultural Project grants, advancement grants, or capital grants. Please remember that you can apply for advancement or capital grants, not both within the same year. This rule has not changed. And funded activities must take place between the 2-year period of support. So that means that we cannot pay for any pre-award costs that are incurred before July 1st, 2020, and we cannot pay for any post-award costs. So if you have costs that incur after June 30th, 2022, we cannot pay for those costs. A match is required for this funding opportunity. All applicants must provide a cash match that is $1 for every dollar of grant funds awarded. Your match may come from reserves, ticket sales, state and federal grants, tuition, but please keep in mind that your match cannot include in-kind contributions, and your match cannot include grants or appropriations from the Montgomery County government. So I'm going to quickly go over the letter of intent. Again, this is a short form. It shouldn't take you that much time to do. The letter of intent requires you to identify your mission, and again, your mission should be arts and or humanities focused. You should upload your IRS letter of determination if you're a new applicant. If you are not a new applicant, we should have that on file already. Please identify your Montgomery County address, and we need you to identify proof of a paid executive director or an equivalent position. Please include a list of your board members with their residency and work address. And we need you to provide your eligible cash operating expenses and income for the past 3 completed fiscal years. And we also need you to list your programming both in the county and outside of the county. So you will hear from staff either way after the letter of intent deadline has passed. We know that you are eager to start your full application. So if you're one of those applicants who's feeling pretty confident that your letter of intent will be submitted, or if you're a new applicant and you're just curious about the types of questions that will be listed on the full application, please know that you can download a template. We always encourage people to plan in advance. So If you're one of those applicants that submitted your letter of intent, go ahead and go to our website. You can find the letter of intent when you go to our website. You'll hit the home page, click on Find Opportunities. That's the grant section of our website. You'll see a bunch of squares representing different funding opportunities. Click on the GOS2 square. Scroll down and you'll see menu options. You want to click on the application menu option. Look to the right and you will see links for how to download a template that includes all the application questions. So while you're waiting for us to review the letter of intent, you can start typing up your response to the application questions. And if you wish, once you are invited to submit your application, you can just jump into Fluid Review and you can cut and paste your answers so that you don't have to feel stressed out about time. So the application deadline is Friday, March 13th at 11:59 p.m. Please remember that we cannot accept late applications. So please do not put yourself in the horrible situation of starting an application on the day of the deadline. Don't do it, folks. Don't stress yourself out. Please remember that on the day of the deadline, staff will not be here until 11:59 p.m. We work normal business hours on the day of the deadline. We will be here till 5:30. So that means that if you have a technical issue at 9 o'clock at night, we cannot help you. You're on your own. Please also keep in mind that if everyone is submitting at the same time on the day of the deadline, Fluid Review will move slower. So that means that you could be working on your application at 11:30, and let's say you finally decide to hit the submit button at 11:45, giving yourself very little time to actually have your proposal move through the portal. What you may see is that moving circle, that spinning circle, which means that Fluid Review is processing. And it could be that you see that circle for a long time because everyone's procrastinated on submitting their proposal. And then sadly, what could happen is that, you know, the time could move on and it could be 12 midnight and you don't successfully get your application through the portal because Fluid Review is moving slower. So please don't put yourself in that position. Again, you know, a friendly reminder that you should never fear the submit button, because when you hit the submit button, as long as it's before the deadline, you can still get back into your application, make changes, and save those changes. Please note that if you are also one of those applicants who finishes your proposal and then you forget to hit the submit button, we won't receive your application, which means that it won't get funded. It won't go to panel. If we don't receive your application, it won't go anywhere. And it's always heartbreaking when we get phone calls from applicants a couple weeks after the deadline, and they're surprised because they haven't heard anything from us. And we ask them if they hit the submit button, and they say, "Oh, I forgot to." That's always heartbreaking. That means that they've put all this work into the application, and it just won't be reviewed by anyone. So please don't fear that submit button. I can't overstate it, and I also can't overstate that we cannot take late applications. There are no exceptions to the rule. All right, so to go over some pertinent changes again, I mentioned earlier in this presentation that we have taken another look at our scoring rubric, and the evaluation criteria is very important. The evaluation criteria that is connected with the scoring that you see listed on the slide, this is what the panel uses to evaluate and score your proposals. Please do read the guidelines carefully, read them multiple times, pay close attention to how we have defined this evaluative criteria. When you go to our guidelines, you start on page 8 and you'll see that each of the 4 evaluative criteria is broken down in detail. In particular, I want you to pay close attention to community impact because you'll see that this evaluative criteria has the highest point allotment, and that's different from last year. Last year and the years prior to that, all of the evaluative criteria was evenly weighted. So for this year, you'll see that we've defined community impact in detail at 35 points. This entails that the organization uses data and demographics to clearly define their audience and to demonstrate an understanding of the community to be served, that the organization conducts outreach to engage diverse communities, including marginalized populations, that the applicant includes the community and program planning, program evaluation, and is responsive to community feedback, that the organization collaborates and forms meaningful partnerships with other stakeholders to achieve the organization's mission, that the organization ensures that programs, services, facilities, and online media are accessible to the public by identifying and removing barriers to participation, and that the applicant achieves results indicating that programs are relevant and inspiring to the people, organizations, and communities for whom they are intended. I'm going to take another sip of water. Hold tight. I have to stay hydrated because I'm doing so much talking, so thanks for your patience. So we understand that it takes a long time to rectify historical inequities. So please know that we are not expecting all applicants to have diversity, equity, and inclusion solved. We don't expect you to have all this figured out by early March. That would be unfair. What we want you to do is to be honest about where you are doing well, but also where your deficiencies are. So let's say you're one of those organizations that feels that they've done a great job in terms of programmatic diversity. You've done a great job presenting artists or scholars that are diverse. Let's say you've done a great job including marginalized communities in your audience, but then you take a look internally and you see that your staff is not diverse at all and your board is not diverse at all. So this is where we want you to be honest. So please do not write a proposal that says, oh, everything is great. We exemplify DEIA in all of our operations in every sense of the word. We would prefer that you say, while we have made significant strides in programmatic diversity, we do recognize that we lack board and staff diversity. And then you come up with a plan. You come up with some concrete goals with a realistic timeline for how you plan to rectify the situation. So you get together with your staff and your board and you say, how about this? We plan to have a slight increase in board diversity by FY22 or FY23 by engaging in these three actions. We encourage you to implement these goals into your strategic plan, into both your short-term and long-term planning. You'll see that on the application, we have questions devoted to planning, and that's where you can insert your goal setting for how your organization will achieve diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, both internally and also externally. And know that the panel tends to be quite good at determining when an organization is not being clear about where they are in terms of equity and inclusion. So again, here's what we don't want to see. If you're one of those organizations that has a broad mission where you state your main purpose is to provide excellent art or excellent humanities offerings to everyone in the community, and that's it. You're not an ethnically or racially specific organization. You're not focused on one discipline. You have a broad, multidisciplinary, open-ended mission. That's not bad. There's nothing wrong with having a mission that's open-ended, but what you don't want to do is submit an application where it's clear that your programmatic offerings are homogeneous, you upload work samples and the panel sees that the audience looks homogeneous, you provide a link to your website and the panel sees photos of staff and board and all of that is homogeneous. If I'm describing your organization, if that sounds like the current state of your organization, again, please don't write answers in your narrative that say, everything's great, we serve everyone. If you know that you are not serving everyone, Please be honest about that. Again, please say, we recognize that our audience is not culturally diverse. This is something that we struggled with for years, and here is our plan to slowly rectify the situation. Honesty is best in these situations. I can guarantee you that you will get a lower score if you gloss over any of your deficiencies, and that also goes beyond community impact. So let's say you're one of those organizations, for example, that's been struggling with your finances lately. Again, it's best to be honest. We understand that managing an organization is not easy. This is not an easy field. So if you have had a major deficit that you need to overcome, you submit your financial documents and it's clear that you've struggled financially, just be honest. Tell the panel through your narrative, we understand that we've been struggling financially because of A, B, and C, and here's our plan to slowly get to a healthier place in terms of financial management. You will get a higher score with that path instead of saying, oh, everything's fine, we're doing well financially, and then the panel looks at your financial documents and they see a bunch of debt. You don't want that to happen. Just be upfront with your challenges. And know that the panel wants to help, board, grants community, staff, we all want to help. So it's best to be honest so that we are aware of how we can help our community thrive. Again, a friendly reminder that you have to have a minimum score of 60 in order to receive a grant. I mentioned this earlier. And we are here to help. So in addition to the race equity training that a number of you have participated in, we also have resources on our website that can help. We have a couple of helpful resources that we pulled from Americans for the Arts. Americans for the Arts is one of our largest advocacy organizations in the country. And note that even though their title is Americans for the Arts, if you represent a humanities organization, it's still worth checking out their website because a lot of their suggestions are really applicable to cultural organizations as a whole. So there's the Arts and Social Impact Explorer. You'll see a direct link to this tool from our website. It's actually a lot of fun. It's this interactive wheel that you can play around with. You can click on a tab and see how the arts intersect with community cohesion, civic dialogue, immigration, education and youth development, lifelong learning, diversity, access, equity, and inclusion. There are a lot of different tabs that you can play around with to help you brainstorm for how your organization can appropriately serve your target community. And then we also have another pretty meaty document that was developed by Americans for the Arts. It's called the Continuum of Impact. It's pretty thick, so if you're short on time, take a look at the table of contents and pick the subject that you feel like you need help with. There's suggestions for how to develop outcomes and indicators. There's data collection suggestions within this document. So while we would encourage you, when you have the time to read through the full document, know that you can skim it. You can look at the contents as a guide to see, where you can quickly read to get some tips on how to, again, figure out how to best serve your community. So I'm going to go over the full application requirements. All applications must contain a completed narrative, organizational support materials, financial support materials, programming support materials, and work samples. And I'm going to take another sip of tea. Excuse me for a moment. All right. In terms of organizational support materials, we will already have your IRS letter of determination because of the letter of intent, and also the board of directors list because of the letter of intent. But for the organizational support materials for your full application, you'll also need to submit key staff and volunteers with their bios. Know that bios can be a great way to brag about the expertise in your organization. So write these carefully. Think about the ways that you want your staff to shine. So let's say, for example, you recently hired some talented staffer who's a marketing whiz. This person is like an expert on social media, really understands how to communicate to a diverse demographic using various different marketing and communication tools. Definitely make sure that person shines within their bio. Please upload a current strategic plan if your organization has one available. And it's always helpful to see an organizational chart if your organization has that available as well. Please also include your audit. Now, this is a very important item to upload because unlike our other funding opportunities, we require an audit for this funding opportunity. And importantly, just like I mentioned earlier, we require that you meet all of the eligibility requirements for 3 consecutive years. This also pertains to the audit. So if you are a new applicant, if you are an applicant who normally applies to GOS 1, which was formerly called General Operating Support for Mid-Sized Organizations, please note that you have to have more than just an FY19 audit. You have to have an audit from 2 years prior as well. So that means that if you are a new applicant to this category, you must submit your FY17 audit, your FY18 audit, and your FY19 audit. That's 3 audits. So if you have any questions about this requirement, I encourage you to contact staff, but know that there are no exceptions to this rule. In the past, we've had organizations say, hey, we're new to this, we only have 1 audit, or, we'll have our audit, after June 1st. We can't make any exceptions to the rule. This is something that the board has voted on, so this can't be changed for this funding opportunity as of now. So please know that we require 3 years of audits for this funding opportunity, and your audit must be prepared by an independent certified public accountant. Your audit must also include the auditor's report with notes. And this is new this year. You'll actually submit a budget worksheet that staff has created that will be submitted with your audit. We hope that this will make the whole process of determining allowable and unallowable expenses and income more clear when we work on the base awards. This budget worksheet is not due until you receive your audit. You can upload both at the same time. It's a pretty self-explanatory budget worksheet, and if you wish, your accountant can do this worksheet for you if you wish, if that's easiest for you. And we also require that you submit your FY19 990, and this must be received by staff no later than June 1st, 2020. Again, no exceptions to the rule. We must have these documents by June 1st, 2020. If we don't receive them by June 1st, then your application is no longer eligible. In terms of other financial support materials, you need to submit your financial statements, a profit and loss and balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. You must submit your current fiscal year operating budget with actuals and year-to-date expenses and income. And you must submit your projected FY21 budget if that is available. Taking another sip of water. Okay, in terms of programming support materials, this has not changed compared to previous years. Please submit 1 PDF containing any of the following: newspaper clippings, photos, brochures, flyers, marketing materials, programmatic booklets. These documents help the panel to understand your programmatic offerings to the community. You can include positive reviews of your programmatic offerings to the community. Please think like a curator, and I'll say this when we discuss work samples as well. Please avoid submitting a PDF that includes 50 documents. That won't help you out. The panel has a lot to absorb. You don't want to overwhelm the panel. So please choose your documents carefully. Choose the best of the best. Do not include 50 documents. Some might be good, some might be mediocre. Don't do that. You're better off submitting 2 or 3 documents that are stellar That's way better than confusing the panel and overwhelming them with a very high number of documents within one PDF. In terms of work samples, again, I'll say the same thing. Think like a curator. Please do not upload 5 videos, 5 audios, 50 images, 20 documents. Please don't do that to the panel. Please carefully choose work samples that show the best programmatic offerings that your organization has offered to the community. Recent work samples are encouraged, so try to avoid submitting a work sample from the 80s, ideally as recent as possible. We do have restrictions in terms of the length of your work samples, so know that if you are a performing arts organization or a media arts organization, we encourage you to submit either video or audio. The panel can't really discern the quality of your work if you just submit stills. Stills make sense for visual arts organizations or for a number of organizations that represent the humanities, but for performing and media arts, please submit video and audio. And know that if you don't have the technical capabilities to edit your video or audio to be the length that does not exceed our length requirements, please note that you can give the panel directions in terms of whether or not they should fast forward and then stop watching at a certain time. So let's say, for example, you decide to upload a PDF that has a hyperlink that will lead the panel to a website like YouTube or Vimeo. We actually encourage that approach. That can be easier than uploading a video or audio to Fluid Review. But let's say you have that hyperlink and in the PDF, and let's say this phenomenal video of an impeccable jazz vocalist singing goes on for 20 minutes. Let's say that you know this vocalist does a really great job 10 minutes into her performance. You can tell the panel, please fast forward 10 minutes and stop watching after 5 minutes. So you can give them time frames and clear directions if you don't have the capability to edit your audio or video files. And you know, the length and minute restrictions here that are on this slide are also listed in detail in our guidelines. If you have any difficulty uploading your work samples, don't hesitate to contact staff. Annalicia is really good at answering Fluid Review questions, and she's happy to help you out. Please try your best to contact her, though, well before the deadline. The day of the deadline, we tend to get a lot of tech questions, so the earlier you contact us, the better. So Fluid Review accepts a variety of file formats for images, videos, documents, and audio files. You'll see those listed on Fluid Review. For documents, we ask that you only submit PDFs. Please don't upload Word or Excel documents. If you have an Excel document, you can actually convert that into a PDF. So if you have any difficulty converting your Excel document into a PDF, feel free to contact us. Sometimes the conversion can be a little wonky, and then sometimes the PDF will cut off a couple of columns of your Excel document. So if you're struggling with that, don't hesitate to contact staff, and we can help you out with your PDF conversion. So if you receive an award, this is what will happen. So the award calculation for this funding opportunity is different compared to our other funding opportunities because there's a formula used to calculate the base awards. In terms of the total award calculation, each organization's allowable cash expenses and allowable cash income, I should say, and or allowable cash income, whichever is lower, is calculated covering the past 3 consecutive fiscal years as reported in your audit that you provide to us. We also take into account the organization's panel score, the total number of applicants, and the amount of public funding that we've been given by the county. So in terms of calculating the base award, we take each organization's allowable cash expenses or allowable cash income, whichever is lower, during the past 3 consecutive fiscal years as reported in your audit. We then calculate the 3-year average for each organization, which is multiplied by the base percentage. And that's how we generate the base awards for each organization. We try our best to make sure that each organization receives a minimum 5% base award. That's 5% of your allowable cash expenses or income, whichever is lower. We try our best not to lower the base award from year to year. You'll see in the guidelines that we list 5%, and we try our best to not unstabilize organizations financially. So assume that your base award should consist of a minimum of 5% of your allowable cash income or expenses. Okay, we also have the Competitive Excellence Award for this category, and here's how we go about calculating the Competitive Excellence Award. The mean score is calculated from all of the eligible applications that we receive. Organizations that score above the mean are eligible for an Excellence Award. So that means that if your score falls below the mean, you are not eligible for an Excellence Award. And each organization's Excellence Award is based on their distance from the mean. So here's an example. An organization that scores 10 points above the mean will receive a higher Excellence Award than an organization that only scored 1 point above the mean. If any of you has any questions about how we go about calculating the base award or the Excellence Award, feel free to contact us. Please keep in mind that because this category is now a 2-year funding opportunity, organizations will have to live with the score that is given to them for the FY21 year. So that means that you will have the same score for 2 years. And staff will recalculate the base awards for FY22 based on the updated financial documents that you submit to us, and also based on the county's appropriation in FY22. So know that even though this is a 2-year award and it has not been a 2-year award in the past, the way that we calculate awards is actually not changing in terms of the base. The base award will be calculated the same way that it's been calculated in years prior. The main difference being that organizations will have to live with the same score for 2 years. That's the main difference. All right, so in terms of monetary disbursement, grantees will receive 50% of their FY21 payment made after the receipt of the final report from previous grants, if applicable, your signed grant agreement, the ACH direct deposit form that has to be sent to us, a voided check that also has to be sent to us, and once we receive payment from Montgomery County. And we plan to announce grant awards in June 2020. So this element also has not changed in terms of the schedule of payment. Grantees will receive the rest of their award, the remaining 50% of their payment, after they submit their mid-year report, which is due on January 31st, 2021, and after we receive our second installment of funding from the county government. And please keep in mind that the FY22 payment schedule will be the same. Instead of submitting a full application, you'll submit another report with updated financial materials. Then you will also submit another final report. So you'll basically just continue with your reporting for FY22 instead of submitting a full application, and the payment schedule again will be the same as it is in FY21. So I'm going to go over the technical aspects of fluid review after I take yet another sip of water. All right. So we recommend that you use Google Chrome or Firefox. Those are the best web browsers for best optimization of fluid review. If you are a new applicant and you need to create an account, please click on the gray sign up button. It's pretty self-explanatory. Once you click on that sign up button, you will have to fill out normal details, your name, email. You'll create a password. It requires a phone number. It's nothing too difficult. Then after you create your account, you will receive an email that confirms your registration. If you do not receive this email, if you've checked your inbox and you checked your spam and you don't see it, please contact staff and we'll help you out. But you should receive an email confirming your account. When you start the letter of intent, what you'll want to do is click the blue View Grants button. Once you click the blue Grants button, you'll select the appropriate category, which in this case is FY21 General Operating Support 2 Grants. And all these are screenshots that are on the slide, so this is the type of imagery that you should see when you're on Fluid Review. Then you'll be brought to another page that shows you all of the tasks that you need to complete in order to successfully submit your letter of intent. So this is pretty self-explanatory. This is what you should see. So for the letter of intent, as is the case with the application, all required questions have an asterisk next to the question. If you wish to, again, preview the questions before you actually start typing on Fluid Review, you can actually see a template of the letter of intent. There's a link embedded in Fluid Review to get you to the letter of intent template, and you can also download the letter of intent template from our website. But please do keep in mind that we cannot accept any other letter of intent. We can't submit a letter of intent that's submitted through the template. You have to submit your letter of intent through Fluid Review, and that's also the case with the application. So even though you can download a Word template, you can't email that Word template to us. You can't mail it. You have to submit your information through Fluid Review by the deadline. So when you're working on your letter of intent, and this will be the case when you're working on your full application as well, be conscious of the character limits. You'll see that Fluid Review is helpful in that while you're typing, you'll see how much space you have as you're typing. You know, most of the questions we hope have enough enough space there to have you appropriately answer the question, particularly for the letter of intent, because again, this is not a long form. This is not a document that really involves a lot of in-depth text explanation. It's just an eligibility check form. Please do keep in mind, though, that as you enter in your information, Fluid Review doesn't auto-save, so it is important to remember to save your work at all times. I'll say this about both the letter of intent and the narrative, the letter of intent and the application. Please don't place hyperlinks within the narrative questions. Hyperlinks are only for the supplementary materials and the work samples. Hyperlinks for both the letter of intent and the application can confuse both staff and panel. You don't want to, for example, include a random hyperlink to your website that you mistakenly think is clear. The panel clicks on it and they're brought to a website that has a whole bunch of information that they can't, you know, they're not sure where to look. Don't do that. It's a waste of time for the panel. So don't place hyperlinks in the actual narrative for both the letter of intent or the application. And just a friendly reminder, even though I'm talking about the letter of intent and the application at the same time, the panel actually doesn't see the letter of intent. It's again, just an eligibility tool for staff purposes so that we know everyone who is submitting an application is actually eligible. So you'll see a programmatic chart within the letter of intent. It's pretty self-explanatory. You'll see a program description field. It doesn't have to be a long explanation of your program. We just need to make sure that you meet the eligibility requirements for the percentage of programs that take place in the county. So, if your letter of intent is approved and you are given the go-ahead by staff to start a full application, you will access the full application from this screen here. You'll enter Fluid Review and you will access the full application from your account homepage. You'll see a bunch of narrative questions, obviously, in the full application. Please note that at the end of the application, you'll see these charts where we gather a bunch of data from all applicants. Do not worry about these charts. They're actually not used to calculate your score. The panel doesn't see these charts. It's for our own reporting purposes. We have funders that we have to report out to, and we also send data to organizations like Americans for the Arts so that we can help with their assessment of the field as a whole, so that we can help with their advocacy efforts. But these charts in no way impact the scoring, or will in no way impact your grant amount. So please don't stress out over these charts, but we do need you to fill them out so that we can report out to various different entities about our funding opportunities. So while you're working on Fluid Review, you'll see a green confirmation bar at the top when you have actually completed the full application form. Even though the application form task says complete, know that you can still edit your application as long as you do it before the deadline. And just always remember to save your work if you continue to edit your application. In terms of uploading files, you'll see a screen that looks like this here. Please select the blue Browse for Files button to upload files to Fluid Review. The types of files that are supported by Fluid Review are listed on the right-hand side. When you upload a file, it will appear at the bottom of the screen, and when you're done, you can hit Back to Submission. So we know that we have applicants that sometimes like to have multiple staffers work on the proposal, and that's fine. You can create a team in Fluid Review. It's pretty easy to do. You can click on the gray button to the right side that says Add Members. It's got a little icon of a person listed right next to it. So you click on that button. And then you just fill out the pertinent information about that member. Please note that you'll have to fill this out even if that member already has their own account within Fluid Review. And if this person already has an account, please make sure that the information matches. So if Sandy Sue has an account and you're also adding Sandy Sue to your team, Sandy Sue should have the same information in both accounts. If you have any questions about how to go about this, feel free to contact staff. So again, please do not fear the submit button. I've said this before. But before I talk about the submit button, know that if the submit button is gray, that means that you haven't completed all the required tasks, so you will have to go back through the proposal to finish up your task. When your submit button is a vibrant blue, that means that you can go ahead and submit your application. That means that it's complete. Please hit that submit button as soon as possible, because again, you can always get back into your application and edit if you want to rewrite an answer to a particular question, or if you decide, you know what, I don't really want to include that video. I'm going to take it down. I want to include a different video instead. That's perfectly fine. Just remember to hit save. But please, 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 please do not wait until 11:50 on the day of the deadline to hit the submit button. We cannot help you if your application does not flow through the portal in time. So when you hit the submit button, you'll see another page that asks you to confirm that you are ready to submit. Again, you shouldn't fear this page at all. You just go ahead and confirm that you're ready to submit your application by hitting that blue continue button. And when you have submitted your application, you should receive an automatic an automated email that confirms that your submission has come through. Please notify staff if you do not receive this email. Check your junk or your spam folder first, but if you still can't find it, please contact staff as soon as possible. Please don't wait until a week later. Contact us as soon as possible so that we can look into the situation to see if there's something wrong. We know that you all work really hard on your proposals, so we want to make sure that they get through. So if you don't see this email, please contact us as soon as possible. We do encourage you to download your application once you have completed it. So after you hit the submit button, please download your application and save a copy in another location. You can save multiple copies if you wish. If you just want to play it safe, it's a smart thing to do to save it in multiple locations, especially since, you know, applicants put so much time and effort into their proposals. All right, so that pretty much covers the fluid review section of this portion of the presentation. So very often I get the question, which opportunity is the best fit for my organization? Should I go to GOS 1 or GOS 2? And that can be a pretty nuanced discussion. We do encourage applicants to contact us if they're confused about which category is the best fit, but keep in mind a few things. We encourage you to think about organizational capacity, financial stability, and right sizing when determining which funding opportunity is the most appropriate fit. Know that while both GOS 1 and GOS 2 are competitive funding opportunities, we do expect that organizations that have a lot of resources will be able to effectively offer more to the community than teeny organizations with a small budget. So keep that in mind in terms of panel scrutiny. So if you're one of those organizations that has a huge budget and you have a lot of staff, know that the panel will scrutinize you at a different level than an organization that has, you know, smaller staff and a tiny budget. So that's something to keep in mind, that while both funding opportunities are important and both funding opportunities are competitive, and technically GOS 1 has more applicants than GOS 2, the level of panel scrutiny for GOS 2 is actually a notch higher than it is for GOS 1 because organizations that enter this funding opportunity do have access, depending on the size of their budget, to a lot more money than the applicants that are in GOS 1. Now, there are a few of you that are in that in-between space where your budget may give you a lower base award in GOS 2 than it could in GOS 1. GOS 1, we've risen the maximum grant amount request. So you could be one of those organizations that if you score high in GOS 1, you might have access to a higher grant. So again, this is an important decision. Think it over carefully, particularly since GOS 2, as I've mentioned before, is now a 2-year funding opportunity. So that means that if you decide to apply in GOS 2 and you get a grant in GOS 2, you have to stay here for 2 years. You cannot get a grant in GOS 1 in FY21 and then decide in FY22 to apply to GOS 1. That's not allowable. Also, if you're one of those organizations that historically has applied to midsize, which is now GOS 1, and you decide to switch to GOS 2, you have to stay there for 2 years. You cannot revert back to GOS 1 in FY22. So again, we're here to help. If you're confused about which funding opportunity to choose, just contact staff and we'll talk it over with you. So I'm going to go over some general grant writing tips before I answer your questions. We encourage you to read the descriptions for previously awarded organizations for to get an idea of the types of grants that we've given out. Even if you're a grantee who has gotten grants here for years, I think it's always smart to read through the descriptions of grants that we have given out. It's just good to stay on top of our funding activities for your own knowledge. Please do not wait until the last minute to start your application. I can't overemphasize this, folks. You know, it's heartbreaking when we come in on Monday after the deadline is passed. The deadline is on a Friday. We're not working through the weekend, and then we come in on Monday and we get the sad voicemails and the sad emails with people who don't understand what happened because they hit the submit button at 11:57. Please don't do that to yourself. We cannot help you if your application does not go through the portal. That just means that you've missed out. And importantly, the earlier you start your application, the better, because that gives you time to ask staff questions. And normally what happens is that individuals who start their applications early, they're clearer applications, they're better written. You know, normally what happens is that when people wait till the last minute, they're rushing, your applications have typos, sentence structure issues, they're not clearly written, and that can lead to a lower score. So don't do that to yourself. Try your best to start early so that you have time to edit and write clearly. Please, please, please read the guidelines more than once. They're long, there's a lot to absorb, there are changes in the guidelines, so it takes a minute to absorb them. Read the guidelines carefully, read the instructions on fluid review carefully. Always refer to the evaluative criteria as you work on both your narrative responses and as you work on your supplementary materials and your work sample uploads. It's always good to have someone who's not familiar with your organization proofread your application. I think it's really easy when you're involved in the day-to-day operations of your organizations. It's easy to make assumptions about what you think the panel will understand. Know that the panel has an excellent understanding of the arts and humanities sector as a whole, and they'll have an understanding of what's going on in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. They may even have heard of your organization. Maybe they've gone to one of your programmatic offerings, but don't assume that they really know your organization in depth. You can't make that assumption. So it's always good to have an outside individual who effectively is reading your application like a panelist might, someone who has fresh eyes, and make sure that they get what you're trying to convey. If they get it, you're good to go. If they have questions about what you've written, then I suggest you go back to your application to make sure that it's as clear as it can be about what your achievements are and what your struggles have been. Just try to write as clearly as possible. Please prepare your support materials in advance. You can even start that now. You can start looking at, you know, which videos, which photos, which you know, marketing materials show you at your best. Start that process early, because that sometimes can be the trickiest part of your proposal submittal. And we do encourage you to attend panel meetings. It's always a wonderful learning opportunity. So please try your best to attend the panel meeting. We announce the panel meeting as soon as we have a date confirmed. The date has not been confirmed yet, but we will notify you as soon as we have a date confirmed. So a reminder that all applications and the letter of intent must be submitted on Fluid Review. We have the templates. Please do not email us a template. Submit all of your materials and answer all the questions on Fluid Review. Please make sure that your applications are complete. And a friendly reminder again that we cannot accept late applications under any circumstances. Please remember to sign up for our newsletters if you have not done so yet. It's a good way to keep in touch with what the council is offering to the community. It's a good way to be notified for any other upcoming funding deadlines, application deadlines, any workshops or webinars that we offer to the community, any events that we have. It's a good way to stay in the know of what we're offering to applicants and grantees. And now I'm going to move on to questions after I take one more sip of water. I need to stay hydrated with all this talking. Give me 1 second. Okay, I see that the audio has been breaking up. I'm really sorry. I see that some of you have had a hard time hearing. So know that we have been posting webinars to our website. It takes us a few days to get this done, but when we do this, we check audio. So hopefully the team here can adjust the audio so that everything that I've said is clear. My sincere apologies if there were points of the presentation that you did not hear clearly. So know that we'll also send the slide deck out. Again, it takes us a few days to do this, but for anyone who's registered, we send the slide deck out. And also know that we intentionally do these webinars well before deadline, so you have time, to ask staff any questions that you may have. So my apologies if any of you had a hard time hearing what I was saying. Let's see here. So I have a question about the board list. Let's see here. Could you please confirm on the board list we need to submit for the LOI? Do we need full addresses or just city zip for the home and work? We asked for full address. So if you have any concerns about that, contact staff, but we really need to verify that your organization is meeting the board eligibility requirements for this funding opportunity. So we do ask for the full address. I'm going to scroll down here and look at these other questions. How much detailed information do you need on the LOI under program description? We just need to make sure that you're meeting the minimum requirement for the percentages that we require for programming happening in the county. So we don't need extensive detail. So let's say you're an organization and you have held, let's say, 25 concerts in the county. Your programming description could be held 25 jazz concerts at the Civic Center in Silver Spring. It doesn't have to be extensive. We just want to make sure that you're meeting minimum programmatic requirements. Okay, so you know what, folks? I believe that I may have incorrectly answered one question, the previous question regarding the board list. It looks like for the letter of intent, we actually we'll take city and zip code. So sorry about that. I just took a look at the guidelines and realized that I misspoke, so my bad. So as long as you can provide the city and the zip code, again, this is just an eligibility check. We just want to make sure that you're meeting the minimum requirements for eligibility in order to submit a proposal. So again, my apologies for the board list for the letter of intent. You can submit just city and zip code for each board member so that we can determine whether or not you're meeting the minimal requirements for the number of board members that need to reside or work in the county. Let's see here, I'm going to scroll through some more questions. Some of you have mentioned that the phone audio worked fine. Thanks for reporting back. Again, we'll listen to the recording and hopefully we can make everything clear so that you all can come back to it later once it's posted on the website. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to hang on the line for a couple of more minutes just to give folks a little time to write any questions. Oh, here's another one. What's the difference between the panel review and the board approval? Do we have feedback after the panel review? So that's a good question. So there really isn't much of a difference. As I've said before, the panel's assessment is held in high regard. Know that if you've come to a panel meeting, you'll see that staff is there, and we are carefully tracking panel comments and feedback. So if a panelist makes a mistake, people are human. Let's say that they make a mistake and say, well, I don't see evidence that this organization provides scholarships to underserved youth, and my colleague Karen will say, actually, if you see on page 20, they mentioned that they provide scholarships to low-income students in Gaithersburg. So sometimes a situation like that can happen. Staff will try our best to catch panelists if they make a mistake, but know that if you hear a panelist make a mistake and staff has not had the time to catch it in that immediate moment, that's why we have multiple cooks in the kitchen. So when the panel meeting is done, staff goes through all the panel comments in depth to make sure that all comments and scoring are in alignment with the evaluative criteria and the guidelines, and that there are no factual mistakes within the panel review. And the board and the grants committee do the same thing. We have multiple eyes on these just to make sure that everyone is catching any potential mistakes that are factual mistakes. And I emphasize the word factual. This does not mean that, if the panel has made a comment that's in alignment with the evaluative criteria, let's say that they are reviewing your proposal and they cannot see evidence that the applicant has provided a diversity of funding sources, they've reviewed everything, they see that an organization is heavily reliant on a couple of major donors and they're concerned about that. That's not a factual error if the applicant has provided financial data that shows that they're reliant on a couple of individual donors for the majority of their income. That's not a factual mistake. A factual mistake is more like what I just described. Someone missed something in the application and staff or grants committee or board catches them. But basically, staff review, grants committee review, and board review is to make sure that the panel's comments are in alignment with the guidelines and specifically the 4 evaluative criteria that's listed in the proposal. And we make sure that if we catch a panel comment that's not in alignment with the evaluative criteria, that we contact the panelists and we make sure that it doesn't impact their score. And if it did impact the score, then we actually have the panelists change their score. So it's a very in-depth process that we take seriously. And to be fair, we make sure that there are multiple people involved to make sure that it's a fair review process. So I hope that explanation helped. And if you have any questions about the application review, feel free to contact staff. I'm going to quickly scroll through this to make sure I didn't miss any other questions. Let's see here. I'm not seeing any others. I'm going to hold on the line for another minute just to make sure there are no other questions. Going once, going twice. Okay, folks, well, it's close to 4:30, so I think I'm going to wrap this up. Hold on for 1 second here. So here is a listing of the staff that works at the Arts and Humanities Council. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions about anything, whether it's fluid review, answering questions, what happens during the panel meeting. Feel free to contact us with any questions that you may have. We look forward to reading both the letters of intent and the full applications, and we wish you the best of luck with your proposal submittals. Have a good day. Take care, everyone.